AI edits, to me, are fucking weird. They're fucking weird. Like, why are people editing videos of him hugging CEOs? Like, why are we using AI to create an alternate reality where justice could be achieved?
No, because the edits. I never thought he would be everybody's person of interest. Like, his grandparents founded the Lorient Health Systems.
Well, is it loaded?
I tell you, officer, it wasn't, but now it is.
Ooh, them's a badass nigga. Now for the
But this video is going to be all about desirability politics, revolutionary violence, and what this current moment kind of tells us about where we are in relation to all of these things. And I'm going to provide some historical examples that I think are kind of interesting that kind of show us how humans react to aesthetics, how we react to violence, and how we react to politics based on the attractiveness of the person who committed the violent act, because we all know everyone and their grandma wants to boom, 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 go to boom, boom town with Luigi Mangione, but how many people are gonna fucking break him out of jail? Lately, I've been reading Blood in My Eye by George Jackson, and it's been a great book to contextualize a lot of the things that are happening right now. I think with the second Trump presidency, a lot of people are struggling towards, how do I organize? What is a revolutionary process going to look like? The left has lost. What hope do we even have? Reading the words of George Jackson and understanding the thoughts, feelings, and processes of previous revolutionaries is something that has been really helpful. And when I was reading this book, it talks again and again about revolutionary violence. And in one of the kind of like pages, I take a lot of notes, and I wrote the question, does all action constitute struggle? As soon as the shooting news came out, I was kind of like, does all action constitute struggle? Is Luigi's alleged shooting like a sign of struggle? Is it a sign of like class struggle, things shifting? Like, what are we exactly supposed to take away from this moment? I think all of the fanfare and people thirsting after him and posting shirtless photos of him and the drag kings and queens that are performing things in honor of him and the fan edits and the AI edits, to me are fucking weird. They're fucking weird. Like, why are people editing videos of him hugging CEOs? The even deeper question is, why do so many social movements, especially in the West, tend to have enigmatic or attractive leaders? We can think about the Weather Underground. We can think about the Black Panther Party. We can think about revolutionary struggles in other nations like Cuba. So many different revolutionary figures. And I think especially in the US, we have an obsession with hotness and political violence in a lot of ways. And I think you can see it throughout media, how the 2010s was filled with all kinds of teen literature and novel to film adaptations of young, thin, white revolutionaries. And now those same revolutionary actresses and actors are supporting Zionism. So there is this weird kind of cycle of revolutionary violence, political violence, media capturing it, and then the public reacting to it on an aesthetic level. And I think social media exacerbates this process even more. And it really comes back to the central question is, why do people care so much that Luigi Mangione is hot? Is it factoring into people being more empathetic towards him? Is it just a part of human nature? We're attracted to certain kinds of bodies. There are certain conventional modes of attractiveness based on our cultural standards. Why does it matter that he's so hot? And why are people so fucking concerned about it? Like, is it because he's bi and 2024 year was the year bisexual? We're going to talk about it. If I could kind of start this video with any kind of thesis, it would be that desirability politics both makes revolutionary violence more accessible to the public. It makes hotness a cultural rationale for any course of action, i.e., you're hot, so you might be right. Hotness attracts us to the revolution, but dilutes the complexity of the revolutionary process. An entryway, but not a road in. First, I think it's really important to talk about what desirability politics is, because I think it frames this whole kind of scenario and situation. I'm going to read from a text called The Belly of the Beast by Deshaun Harrison. It's a really amazing book on anti-blackness, fat phobia, how fat phobia kind of situates us in a world where anti-blackness becomes more possible, and the way that we control and police other people's bodies then becomes more possible too. In The Belly of the Beast, it reads, are not a moral failing of the individual, but rather an inadvertent critique of a society that seeks to punish, harm, and abuse ugly people who dare to name their perceived flaws, are only named as such because of anti-blackness. In many ways, and in other words, insecurities are a response to the violences ugly people are forced to endure. And so often the people deemed ugly are fat, black, and trans, people who are positioned outside of the scope of desire and are thus faced with the hypercriminalization and other violences against their being. Insecure is an adjective. It is a word intended to describe or name a characteristic, and it requires one to reckon with what it means to experience structural advantages over someone who is ugly. These standards, especially in the United States, are predicated on anti-blackness and anti-fatness and anti-disfiguredness, cis-heterosexism, and ableism. As such, people who are black, fat, disabled, and or trans more generally do not have access to beauty. However, as with all capital, one can embody identities that are valued in modern society and still hold identities that are marginalized, which is why the term privilege is not quite specific enough and does not go far enough. Desire is complex. Privilege insinuates that there is a possibility that you can opt out, and that if you don't feel pretty, then you can't possibly benefit from prettiness or suffer the violences of ugliness. Desire/ability politics and desire capital, however, suggest that one does not need to feel pretty to be pretty. One does not need to feel beautiful to be beautiful. One does not need to feel ugly to be ugly. How one benefits or suffers from the subjugation of a particular people is not determined by their feelings. It is determined by the identities that they embody. Desire/ability politics is the methodology through which the sovereignty of those deemed conventionally capital attractive, capital beautiful is determined. Put another way, the politics of desire labels that which determines who gains and holds both social and structural power through the affairs of sensuality, often predicated on anti-blackness, anti-fatness. And I read this with the understanding that in the US's history, there have been things known as ugly laws. And I'm pulling up an article right now by National Geographic called Illegal to be Ugly, the history behind one of America's cruelest laws. Throughout the late 1800s/1900s, there were laws throughout various parts of the US that disallowed people of different ability levels or people that might have different disfigurations to not be allowed in public, to be criminalized for their literal appearance. And so when we contrast this notion of desirability politics coupled with anti-blackness, anti-transness, anti-disfiguration, alongside this reality that light-skinned or white people that commit certain acts of revolutionary violence are applauded, thirsted after, lauded in the mainstream media. There's certain kind of features. Featureism can be an aspect of how people are revered. And what are the benefits of this social process and what are the negative aspects of it? I definitely want to talk about Luigi, but first I want to start with a story that actually, when I was writing the outline for this video, I remembered that when I was in college, my senior year, I ended up running for student government. And I, at the time, was really into like politics of awe and spectacle and blah, blah, blah. And I was really into the Weather Underground. And I was the one that actually suggested the idea for this, but we ended up having a whole political campaign to run for student government where it was called Vote Bear. Bobcats for Affordability, Accountability, Responsibility, and Empowerment, I think. And it was a semi-nude campaign. And I remember pitching this and I was like, we're all young, we're hot, we're cool, we're radical. Like, let's do this. Let's do a nude campaign. Semi-nude photos all around campus, putting up flyers, having it all be about transparency. And it was, I feel like at the time I was reading a lot into Weather Underground and Black Panther Party, and I was noticing a lot of the aesthetics of revolution and how those aesthetics could be deployed in certain situations to get people's attention. At one point, I was canvassing for like running for student senate president, and me and a couple of other people found a sketch that someone drew of me and other people on my ticket, and it was like me naked passing things out. And it was basically like a joke about us being hippies. And my friends were like, oh my gosh, is this racist? Like, we go to a PWI, like they can't draw black. And I was like, wait, I have a 6-pack in that photo. And I ended up not winning. And I don't think it was because our campaign didn't have any substance. We were demanding all kinds of things like lowering tuition and more democratic decision making and transparency among administrators and cultural competency and so many things. But in the end, I look back at that and I wonder, why was I so attracted to these politics of desirability? If we'd chosen a different route, would we have had a better chance of winning? Would we have had a better chance of opposing this other ticket that was already angry that student government had been radical for the past year? in this Luigi Mangione situation, we can kind of read it in a lot of ways. 2024 kind of being the year of the bisexual is a big part of why Luigi Mangione, on some level, is being so fond after. There are a bunch of things that make him relatable on a certain level. Challengers, think about Sabrina Carpenter making out with that alien. Think about the rise of bisexuality in the media, how much queer cinema we had. There definitely has been a shift towards a kind of more queer logic in a lot of mainstream media spaces. And I think Luigi being bisexual and committing this act of political violence, in a sense, only makes him more accessible to younger folks that are interested or confused or want to debate or thirst after him, because I think there's also another interesting parasocial aspect, like the fact that you can go online and find his yearbook photos and old TikToks and Instagram reels and videos of him. And not only is this person considered attractive by many, but there's a certain level of accessibility that people feel that makes it easier for them to express their attraction to him. There's the fact that he is relatively conventionally attractive, which is something that a lot of people kind of admire or revere to be. There's the fact that he was in engineering and STEM, so he has certain mental capacities that I think people admire and revere on the internet. Makes him seem or appear approachable. And then when we look more into his background, coming from a wealthy family, being disabled, being very clearly affected by this disability from the various interviews with people in his life. And all of these kind of make a cocktail of a young person in their 20s whose life, political world, and social world has been ravaged by the ways that these systems against us don't really take care of us, the way that healthcare companies deny claim, charge people for things that they shouldn't have to pay for in order to be taken care of. I think people are attracted to the hotness, the brute force of someone who is attractive, that is determined, even if their course of action doesn't necessarily make sense. I think the desirability kind of element of it kind of makes me think of wealth, the way that class consciousness is shifting. I think people are either obsessed with wealthy people because they believe that they are somehow smarter and are genius because they have been able to be wealthy. And I think the same way that social media is making us even more obsessed with aesthetics are something that can give people buy-in or trust or make it more likely that you can build an audience or be heard or seen as logical online or in the internet space, even if they don't know him, even if he is only the alleged shooter, and even if this is a really fucked up situation that there might be some deeper things that people should be talking about, like the statistics around healthcare or whether or not these kind of acts will happen more or what the potential for these kind of acts are in a Trump administration. How many shirtless photos of this dude can there be out on the internet? Why are there so many shirtless photos of him? Why do these shirtless photos kind of erase the fact that this person did have a disability? Should their disability be something more in the forefront of these conversations when talking about their body and bodily autonomy? Would people be celebrating what Luigi did as much if he wasn't Italian, if he wasn't white, if he wasn't of the socioeconomic background that he was? In a lot of ways, I think people are celebrating and revering this because it's kind of an anomaly kind of event. People are used to vigilantes being like alt-right fucking racists. And the idea that a vigilante is someone that you could have gone to college with, who could have been in your dorm room, who maybe you could have made out with if you were a gay guy in college, and now you're watching this person be splattered all around the news and AI videos of them taking their orange jumpsuit off during their perp walk. I think the AI stuff, something about that is strange to me. It's the making light of what has happened to Luigi and the thirsting after him. It almost creates this cocktail where we worry more about the aesthetics than the actual content and complexity of the political act which happened. And it reminds me a lot of the Springfield, Ohio comments that Donald Trump made when he was in his presidential campaign, and all of the dancing videos and TikToks and whatever's after, and how angry that made me. The internet re-aestheticizing something, it really does do a disservice. People that are radical or leftists or anti-authoritarian should really be having deeper conversations with people in their lives about, in order to push back against and say, yeah, this dude might be hot, but shouldn't we have a conversation around our healthcare system, about the economy right now, about class consciousness, around what this act actually means, and what does it mean in relation to a overall kind of approach or process or understanding of revolutionary and political violence.
Long-awaited decision in the Huey Newton murder trial, which has drawn worldwide attention, is now very near. The jury of 7 women and 5 men are deliberating the fate of the Black Panther leader on the 8th floor of that building. It is their job to decide whether he is guilty of killing Oakland policeman John Fry and wounding Officer Herbert Haynes in a pre-dawn shootout last October 28th. 2 floors above the jury, in his cell, Huey Newton, who has made almost no show of emotion during the 8 weeks of trial, calmly awaits the decision of the jury. I talked to Newton in the jail.
As far as the proceedings thus far, that the courts have only reflected the racist attitude of the general power structure, that I haven't received a fair trial.
So a few years ago, I wrote an essay that is still one of my favorites to date, and it's called Beyond Revolutionary Suicide, and I'm going to read a little bit of it. When Huey P. Newton walked out of Alameda County Jail on August 5th, 1970, it was after a 3-year campaign that garnered attention from all around the United States and the globe. The image of Newton, strong and stoic, sitting in the wicker armchair, went public just 7 months before Newton would be sent to jail on charges of killing a police officer in 1968, all of which was only 2 years after the Black Panther Party was founded in 1966. From the beginning, the Black Panther Party operated from a deep political need to heal the community.
A problem. For example, they used to serve cookies and I think graham crackers and milk in the morning to children in primary school who had the money to pay for it. And if you didn't have the money to pay for it, you had to put your head on the desk until the other kids finished eating. I always thought that was very bad, but at the Oakland Community School, everybody eats.
And believed in the power of aesthetics. Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale developed the party's 10-point program, developed a slick attire for the incoming members, started police patrols, and in May 1967 earned international media attention when they stormed the California State Capitol in protest of the Mulford Act. The photo, which activist and writer Eldridge Cleaver had posed Newton for, wasn't to Newton's liking, and he asked for it to be discontinued. Nonetheless, the photo and Newton's political iconography would rise throughout the Free Huey campaign. In his famed memoir, Revolutionary Suicide, Newton noted that he learned to master his thoughts and place no importance on the passage of time. When asked if his experiences in solitary confinement had affected him deeply during a 1973 Playboy interview, Newton replied, "Not me. I had already learned how to handle it." Throughout his jailing, an entire sentence following his 1968 conviction on voluntary manslaughter, Newton spent 33 months in solitary confinement. Newton, however, noted in his writings that his 6-month imprisonment following him stabbing a man at a party in 1964 was what truly prepared him for his incarceration during the Free Huey campaign. During his 6-month incarceration, Newton was usually kept in the dark. Because of the heat, he was also nude and, like other prisoners, was meant to shit and piss in a 6-inch hole. He was given a half of gallon of water a week. By his imprisonment in 1968, Newton was one of 168,000 in the U.S. prison system. In the video of Huey Newton being released from jail, there's all this fanfare, people are screaming, chanting, he takes off his shirt, and in history's mind, this is seen as a triumphant moment. It's a win for a political campaign. But for Newton himself, he noted in interviews that he was anxious. He wasn't necessarily anticipating a crowd outside of the jail, and he took off his shirt because he was hot, assuming he was probably nervous. And if you read Newton's biography after his release, we know that he increasingly became paranoid. He was isolated. The politics of the party was changing. And so this image of Newton in a wicker chair, sitting and staring at the camera, strong and fierce, contrasted the internal struggle that Newton was facing. And I think it's very interesting that when we look at Black men, especially in Black revolutionary literature by men, there is this desire and need for aesthetics to take a stronghold, for them to present themselves as strong, as enduring, as the true leaders of these movements, when internally there can be a lot happening. There can be a lot of trauma. And the Black Panther Party, in a lot of ways, was really centered around both the content and the complexity of their movements versus the aesthetics that they were setting up to attract the public and the mainstream to their movement in the first place, an entryway as opposed to a road in. The Revolutionary Aesthetics of the Black Panther Party and its Impact on Fashion Today, a 2023 article by Victoria Rollins. And this article goes on to say, Next came the leather jacket. In all honesty, it was born out of convenience. The Panther founders, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, shared the idea that every young black man has a black leather jacket or can get one or can borrow one if you can't buy one. This was a fair statement because not every jacket in any given photo was the same. The jacket was unisex and for the first time incorporated black women in a way that centered on the black experience and not just the black male experience. That's not to say misogyny wasn't alive and well, but this was one step towards a truly genderless movement. And the article goes on to read, the Panthers were public relations geniuses who purposely utilized aesthetics and fashion to produce the media spectacles and gain publicity to further their political aims. The Panther look consisted of a black beret, a leather jacket with a dark shirt or black turtleneck, a pin, and dark sunglasses. The uniform took small bits of fashion labeled as nonconformist and created a style that had been translated across movements. The black beret was a sign of militarism. Common among military officers, it was a sign of power. When the black body had no government to cling to for help, the people went inside themselves to find their own footing. The beret was a symbol of strength and a unified cause. We can look at different accounts of the party, and I recently did an interview with Jamal Joseph, who was a part of the Panther 21, and he spoke at length about the different educational programs that the Panther Party had and how they went beyond aesthetics. But there are other accounts by revolutionary women like Assata Shakur, who joined the party and eventually left because they saw that various men were joining either to get into it for some punani or to recite some 10-point program and not really read the books that they were like being assigned and to be able to throw around guns. I recently watched the 1995 film Panther, and that film especially shows these kind of situations and scenarios really well. I'll insert a clip here for folks that might want to check that movie out, and I'll put a link to it in the description.
Hey, man, what the fuck are you doing? Hey!
Malcolm X's widow's life was on the line today and your guns weren't loaded.
A gun's a gun, man. It doesn't need to be loaded.
Tell that to the pigs, or better yet, tell that to Brother Malcolm.
You wait a second.
No, you wait a second! Because you and your punk Panthers are counter-revolutionary.
In history's eye, aesthetics versus content is really complex, and it takes a lot of nuance and reading to really understand the reality of what is going on. And I think with the Luigi Mangione situation, we can easily say like, oh, like people just think he's hot, like people aren't really interested in what he did. But on another level, it has caused tons of conversations around the healthcare system, around political violence, around disability, around surveillance, around whether or not it's wrong to help someone flee if you knew who Luigi was, or will you snitch? It's brought up a lot of different conversations. And so I think from this Panther perspective, there are ways that aesthetics can be a counterpoint to a movement and a revolutionary process, and there are also ways that it can actually bring people in and make them interested. And then we can kind of look to another historical moment, which was the first ever televised debate between presidential candidates on September 26, 1960, between Senator John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. And I was recently watching a YouTube video that talked about how our change in focus has shifted because of the different ways that we're consuming media and how aesthetics like factor into this. And it talked about how this was the first ever televised debate between presidential candidates. And a big part of the reason that Nixon like really struggled in the campaign onward is because this was the first televised debate of presidential candidates. And after the debate, so many people were kind of shocked by how Nixon looked, to the point that his own mother reached out to him and was like, "Are you sick?" And because Kennedy looked so much better, people voted for him more. They voted for him. And so even in this mainstream political process, aesthetics kind of mattered more and pushed people to trust one candidate as opposed to the other. And then we can even look at like Donald Trump versus Biden, and these debates start happening and people are like, oh my God, Biden is so old. Like, oh my gosh, like we can't use him. Like, this is wild. Like, no, he's not going to win against Trump. I was always confused because I'm like, Biden looks as bad as he always has, and so does Trump. And like, he doesn't sound any worse now than he did before, at least to me personally. Aesthetics is what led people to push this Democratic candidate out, and not like these deeper, more nuanced arguments around his policies or lack of initiative in terms of the genocide against Palestinians or anything. And then they just switched over to his VP, and then now it's like, I guess aesthetics matter a lot more and the content matters even less. And I really recommend, if people want to like dig more into political violence beyond this kind of aesthetics conversation, read Blood on My Eye by George Jackson, because it is such a phenomenal text in breaking down different revolutionary ideas and processes and really giving you lots of things to chew on, whether it be talking about above ground organizations or underground organizations, or the rationales and logic around political violence, and how this person who was literally imprisoned and literally captured by the state still found the imagination to kind of think about, how can I look at the world that I live in and be clear about my framework of what a revolutionary process can look like. And to end, I kind of just want to say that I do think the internet is making us more obsessed with aesthetics. I can't really indict this Luigi Mangione situation as something that is just purely people thirsting after him because he's hot and bisexual or whatever the fuck, or he got a fade or whatever it is. And I can't totally put it in the camp of like, this is awakening everyone and it's going to make the revolution more possible. I do think it sort of aligns with George Jackson's perspective in Blood in My Eye, where he says, in order to fight a fascist state, we have to create a kind of playing field where the status quo is not guaranteed, where chaos and political violence and spectacle is possible, and it generates conversation and therefore repression that leads more of the public to look at what the state's capacity is to repress us, to commit violence against us, to pin things against certain people and make examples out of them. And it forces people deeper into a political process. I think there is the potential for this moment to signify that. If Luigi or the alleged shooter can do this to the CEO, what kind of sentiments or acts will happen in the future against other hyper elite, especially under a government and administration like Trump's, where the elite are just going to be handed more and more money and not have to pay more and more taxes, and the people at the bottom are going to get angrier and angrier. What are the modes of organizing that we can do outside of spectacles of violence that allow us to be in community with each other? I have a mutual aid video coming out soon in my Direct Action 101 series, and I really encourage people that are interested in this video to head to that one when that comes out, because I'm going to be talking a lot about how we can share resources, the importance of security culture, and how mutual aid is one of the entryways for us to get into direct action and organizing beyond individual acts or spectacleized acts that can really sometimes really generate a conversation, but they might not bring people deeper into actual tangible political and revolutionary processes in their homes, neighborhoods, and communities. Is the alleged shooter's action still valid politically, even if they are hot? And would people care less if many people didn't consider them to be hot? Many people consider them to be average attractive, or maybe Midwestern attractive, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. What do you think? I think personally, it makes it kind of more entertaining that he's attractive, but it kind of pisses me off. It honestly kind of does. And it's not like it pisses me off that he's hot. It pisses me off that people are so like, I hope this video gave you some food for thought. Leave some comments around whether or not you think Luigi being hot made this more or less a topic of conversation for people. Stay tuned for the next bits of the Direct Action 101 series. There's a mutual aid video that's coming out soon. There's definitely going to be videos on sabotage, marches and rallies, and so much more. And if you want to support this channel, I really highly encourage you become a channel member, or you head to my Patreon, where you get an exclusive series where I share audiobook annotations of my first book, When They Tell You to Be Good, which is a memoir about my political coming of age. If you want to buy it, link is in the bio. If you want to head to my Patreon and spend a few bucks there a month to support this channel and also get some behind the scenes access to how I wrote that book, my reflections on it, check out Belly the Beast. That's a really amazing book that I recommend for folks that are interested in anti-blackness and fat phobia and all of the politics around that. Thank you for watching.